Hello everyone, my name's Tristavision, and I make video game content. This is my first time making a video actually talking to my audience and using my voice. Before I tried to make content that revolved around gameplay and just tried my best to make that funny. I'd sprinkle in some edits, but I thought I was mediocre at best. I definitely think I've improved over time with editing and gameplay, but still it's honestly nothing crazy. That's why I'd like to try something else and see how it's received, and why not talk about something that's being hyped about by a lot of people. That being the Five Nights at Freddy's chapter coming to Dead by Daylight. I presume we'll be getting all the details during the PAX event about the chapter, but that's still about a week away, and in the meantime, why not have some fun? In this video, I'll be going over my ideal way of how I'd like the Five Nights at Freddy's chapter to go. Also, before we get into it, I'd like to shout out Wheat Draws. I do not do art at all, so I've used some of their DVD art, so my perks weren't just scribbles, so they actually look nice. If Wheat Draws happens to find this video and find a problem with me using their art, I will gladly take this video down and re-upload it without any of their perk art. Or even pay them to keep it up. With that said, let's get into it. First off, the killer. For this video, I actually want to cover two different killer ideas, one for Springtrap and one for Vanny. Now obviously, if there's a single killer for this chapter, it will be Springtrap, and for good reason too. Springtrap is the villain of the franchise. If there's only one killer, I don't want the killer to be anyone else. That said, if there's only one killer. FNAF is the most hyped license to ever come to DBD. I'd say maybe Myers, but DBD just wasn't as popular back then for it to get that hype about. That said, since it's the most hype, why not take advantage of that and add two killers? It's never been done before, but apart from even longer queue times for killers when the chapter releases, why not, right? First off, Springtrap. His killer name is The Attraction. I've heard debate about this name, but if I'm going to be honest, I just think this is the most menacing name that also rolls off the tongue well in my opinion, and also suits his character very well. He's a killer with a terror radius of 32 meters and moves at a speed of 4.6 meters per second. He also would be fairly tall, about the same height as Trapper, standard killer stuff. When it comes to his power, a lot of killers in Dead by Daylight lately are just too complex for my liking, and I don't want that for Springtrap, so I've made a fairly simple yet effective power for him. I'll first read off the power in full, and then afterwards I'll go into an explanation of what it all means. His power is called Phantom Walker. Holding the charge ability button allows the attraction to enter a phantom state called Phantom Walker, where he can walk through dropped pallets, vault locations, and survivors. While in Phantom Walker, his speed is slightly reduced and he cannot attack survivors. So to kind of sum up this portion of the power, he's basically a stance switcher similar to Sadako. In his normal state, he's just a normal M1 killer with a secondary ability I'll get to in a minute that has the ability to transform into or out of his Phantom Walker state. Doing this takes 1.5 seconds. When he is in Phantom Walker, his suit would be dark and black, making it very clear that he's in this state. As said, while in Phantom Walker, the attraction can walk through survivors, vault, and pallet locations. I didn't write this in the power, but I just now thought of it, that it would also be cool if he could walk through breakable walls. However, the obvious downside to being in Phantom Walker is that he cannot attack survivors and his movement speed is equal to a survivor's, that being 4.0 meters per second. Now this power can be cancelled midway through as well, so a survivor might think you're about to switch from one mode to another, but really you're faking it, so you can force a pallet drop or something similar to that. His next ability is called Phantomize. The attraction can phantomize vaults, pallets, totems, generators, chests, exit gates, and lockers. He gets 10 phantomized tokens, and any use after 10 will get rid of the first thing phantomized. After an object is phantomized, when a survivor interacts with it, it gets rid of the phantomization on that object. That survivor receives a phantom animatronic jump scare. The attraction will be notified, and that survivor will suffer from the hallucination status effect for 15 seconds. The hallucination status effect causes survivors to see multiple attractions walking around randomly. Each of these attractions also have a terror radius. Survivors also do tasks slower. Okay, I know I said I was going to keep the power simple, but trust me, this isn't a lot. First of all, it can be used on either mode Springtrap is in, whether that's his normal mode or Phantom Walker. Springtrap pretty much can place a trap on any interactable object. Once a survivor interacts with a phantomized object, Springtrap is notified and the survivor gets jump scared. The jump scare survivors would receive would be random between any of the phantom animatronics, those being Freddy, Chica, Foxy, Mangle, Balloon Boy, or the Puppet. These jump scares do not differ from one another apart from animation. Also, after being jump scared for 15 seconds, survivors do tasks 15% slower and see fake Springtraps walking around, each having their own terror radius to really sell the illusion. These terror radiuses would not count towards perk or add-on related items, so if a survivor is inside the terror radius of a fake Springtrap but not the real one, and Springtrap just used Starstruck for example, that survivor would not be affected. Springtrap would not be able to see these illusions by default, although there could be a green or purple add add-on that would allow him to. Now, focusing on his teachable perks, the first one is called Spring Fever. Each tier of Bloodlust activates 30% faster. When chasing the same survivor for more than 35, 30, 25 seconds, they become hindered by 2% until they lose a health state by any means. Now, this perk in particular I designed to sound really good with killers like Trapper and Pig, and not so good with killers like Blight or Nurse, who are almost never gaining Bloodlust because they're always using their power. This would allow those weak killers to catch up faster by not only making themselves faster, but also making the survivor slightly slower. Hex Motion Trigger. Survivors are not granted speed boosts after losing a health state from a basic attack. Your weapon cooldown after you land a successful basic attack is increased by 10, 9, and 8%. Now, if this perk were to actually come into the game, in my opinion, this would no doubt be the most broken Hex perk, which is why I put a little bit of a downside to it, where as long as the Hex is active, your basic attack weapon cooldown is increased. However, once again, similarly to the last perk, this perk would not be that good on killers like Nurse and Blight because they're constantly hitting survivors with their special attack and not their basic attack, meaning survivors would still be granted a speed boost after being hit. And now for his final perk.
I always come back.
Once 5 generators are completed, your basic lunge attack is increased by 30, 35, and 40%. You guys can definitely see the common theme now that I really don't like killers like Nurse and Blight to be that powerful, and I like to increase the power of basic attack killers, and this perk does exactly that. Now let's talk about maps. What map would be best for Springtrap? Honestly, I think it'd be cool to combine all the main games and make an amalgamation of all the FNAF locations, but frankly, that's very unlikely, and being realistic, it'd probably be Fazbear's Fright. For this, I actually made a recreation of the map in Fortnite. That way it'd be much easier for you guys to visualize and see what I have in mind for a map like this. Now, before showing it off, keep in mind this is fairly rough drafted, but you guys can definitely get an idea of what I have in mind. What you're currently looking at is a top-down view of the main building, Fazbear Fright. I should note that Fazbear Fright alone is way too small, so I had to add some outside area to play on as well. There's 2 generators inside the building, and I purposely placed both of these generators on the ends of the building because I didn't want the killer to have to patrol a gen that was deep inside the building. Instead, they could kind of just do a quick peek to see if someone was working on it and go back to patrolling other gens if no one was on it. Since the building only has 2 entrances, I made sure it was on the edge of the map because if it was somewhere in the center, it'd make it way too annoying to go around or even get inside. Now I'll give you guys a quick tour on the inside of the building and a quicker tour on the outside. Walking in, this is the entrance, which actually isn't even in the game, but I thought it was necessary to add and give it a proper entrance. Now here we have the office. This is actually a perfect starting room to show you guys because it has almost every interactable replacement prop I've used. For example, this is a generator, this is a chest, this is a vault location, this is a locker, this is a totem, and right outside here is a hook. I've also placed other props around the map so that those of you who are actually familiar with the FNAF 3 map can get an idea of what's going where. I'll throw those up on screen whenever we walk past something that I've tried recreating. Just as a quick example, this bear here to my left is a recreation of the Freddy statue that sits outside of your office door. Going down this hallway here, if the basement were not to be in Killer Shack, it would go right here where I've placed this locked doorway. This also is not in the game, but you know, main buildings have a basement spawn and I needed to put it somewhere. Now, something I had in mind for this Bonnie and Foxy hallways, I'll call them, is that they are connected by 4 corridors, 2 on each end. There would be 1 pallet randomly on one of these 4 corridors. For example, the pallet is right next to the Foxy head in this case. Stepping out here just to show some visual clarity of how the layout looks, this loops back around to the hallway in front of the office. Now heading down this hallway, here we have another hook and arcade machines. Here again we have the 4 corridors set up similar to the other one, except this one's slightly shorter. Once again, only 1 pallet can spawn in any of these 4 corridors. And heading down here, we have another gen and the exit of this side of the building. And now for the remainder of the map, I'm just going to show it to you with a quick time lapse. It's honestly nothing special, but you know, I figured I'd make it anyway. Now, when it comes to Springtrap's cosmetics, it would be some pretty basic stuff like you'd have Glitch Trap, Burn Trap, let's hope not Scrap Trap. You could even have legendary outfits like from the movie or even the Core 4's outfits. Now, when it comes to his tear radius, on top of not being an artist, I'm also not a musician, but I'd love if it incorporated the... And the last thing I'd like to talk about before closing the Springtrap segment is his weapon. What would his weapon be? I would actually not mind him having a fire axe, despite the controversy. Yeah, it's never been used officially and only in fan material, but I feel like it's thematically fitting. However, while I wouldn't mind a fire axe, I would just prefer if he straight up just used his fists, similar to Nemesis, or even if they gave him a modified kind of claw, maybe similar to Hag. Now, moving on to Vanny. She has a 12-meter tear radius, moves at 4.6 meters per second, and is around the same height as Legion. I always thought it'd make so much sense for her to have perks and powers all to be centered around the idea that she is a follower and obeys the commands and rules she is given, so her power is called Obedience. I will once again first read the power and then go into detail of what it actually means. Holding the power button while walking near scratch marks consumes them, causing the follower, I forgot to mention that her killer name would be the follower, to tear up. Each tier requires more scratch marks to tear up than the last. Tier 2 allows the follower to vault over vaults and break pallets and breakable walls quicker. Tier 3 increases the follower's lunge distance and allows her to activate Trespasser. Tier 4 increases the follower's movement speed when walking near scratch marks. Once at Tier 4, scratch marks can no longer be consumed by the follower. So in English, the follower holds out her hand similarly to Oni when he's collecting blood and collects scratch marks and tears up by doing so, gaining little mini passes each time she tears up. Tier 2 allows her to break pallets and walls as well as vaulting 15% faster. Tier 3 gives increased lunge distance by 20% and allows her to activate Trespasser, which I'll get to in a minute. And Tier 4 increases her default movement speed to 4.8 meters per second when walking within 4 meters of any scratch marks. Once at Tier 4, she can no longer hold out her hand and collect scratch marks due to her reaching the max amount she can collect. Now, time to talk about this Trespasser ability. The follower can press the ability button to activate Trespasser. Doing so increases her movement speed, triples her tear radius, and causes her chase music to be playing for any survivor inside of it at all times. This ability is deactivated and goes on cooldown after performing a basic attack. So basically, once at Tier 3, you can activate Trespasser, which does 3 things. Increases Vanny's movement speed to 4.8 meters per second. If she's in Tier 4 and walking near scratch marks, this would actually be 5 meters per second. This also triples her tear radius, and anyone inside her tear radius hears her chase music constantly. This is a form of stealth in a sense, allowing survivors to know when she's close, but they don't know how close. One last thing to keep in mind with this ability is that her default tear radius is 12 meters, meaning tripling it would only be 36, barely more than the average killer. Her teachable perks consist of Rule Follower. After hooking 4 unique survivors, you gain a permanent 1, 2, and 3% haste while not using your power for the remainder of the trial. Yeah, once again, doing the same thing where I'm making perks that are really good for M1 killers and making perks that aren't good for killers that always use their power. But, shut up. In all honesty, I think this perk would be pretty busted, but honestly, I kind of like making new meta-defining perks, to be honest with you. If some of them are too broken, let me know in the comments. Her next teachable perk is Obey. After destroying a pallet, gain a token up to 3. Once you have gained 3 tokens, you can destroy an upright pallet. This action takes 2.5 to 1.5 seconds. Now, despite what anyone says, I do not think this perk is broken at all. You have to destroy 3 pallets to use it, and then you're able to destroy 1 upright pallet, which takes 1.5 seconds at its max level. Could this pallet be Killer Shack pallet? Yeah, but it's still killing 1.5 seconds of that killer's momentum, and perks are actually supposed to be worth taking into the trial. I think this perk is balanced. The follower's last teachable perk is Heavyweight. After falling from a height, all survivors within 6 meters of you become hindered by 7% for 6, 7, and 8 seconds. Now, this one you can definitely argue with me if you think it's broken, but I personally don't think so. It's very map dependent, and once you learn a killer has this perk, you're just going to stop going to high places unless you have balanced landing. Now, when talking about her map, it can be a lot of things, especially within the Pizzaplex. My first thought was to go to kind of the ruin setting, because that definitely fits Dead by Daylight more, but honestly, I don't think it should be something like this. Frankly speaking, the settings in Ruin are just not nearly as memorable, and I still think there's a couple places in the base game of Security Breach that could still work. The one I chose is Roxy Raceway. It just seems like it would be a Dead by Daylight map. And although it would technically be an indoor map, the entire map is one room, essentially not making it an indoor map. Obviously, some blocked off areas would become unblocked, there would be some added loops and such, but you guys get the idea. Obviously, with Vanny, there's a lot less you can do with skins than you can with Springtrap, but there's still probably some cool ones. For example, Red Vanny that U2's did, and there could also just be like a new version of Vanny, just like a straight up black version with red eyes called Black Rabbit. That would be pretty sick. Now, I would really like her terror radius to be that one Ballora theme in the Security Breach trailer, except it was remixed hella. Here, I'll just play it now. And to be honest, when it comes to Vanny's weapon, there's not really anything special she has. She had a kitchen knife in that one promotional image, and I think that's all she really has. So yeah, sure, I'll give her that. But anyway, that has been my ideal chapter for a Dead by Daylight x Five Nights at Freddy's collab. This has also been my first video, like I said earlier, talking with my voice, and it's been a lot of work, but it's also been a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please like, comment, and potentially subscribe if you like what you saw. Thanks. See ya.